Did we just see somebody? Did someone just do something? I thought I saw this. I just want to know what to do next time. I just want to wait. Gremlins. Just gremlins. I'm just going to wait for it. That's fair.
I guess that is started.
Gotcha. No, what did you do?
I had to restart something over there.
Oh, okay. Is this something that you do?
No, I'd rather not touch it.
Okay.
More blood stuff. What you want? Let's wait for this to come online and then you have at least got that. Yeah, no problem. It's up and running, so we're unless you want to talk about it, otherwise you don't need salary. Your system will work, but eventually it'll turn on. I'm really pushing it here. I'll do it to you if you want to wait for it. And all you're doing is once this goes online, everything will pop up again.
So that way there's nothing.
Well, I guess you just have to do the voice. I don't know if this is keeping track. I guess just be loud.
That's okay.
At least your projection.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah. Yeah, I just okay. That works for me.
Hi. Are we ready to go? All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience while we got that technical stuff sorted out. And thank you again to Will Blanc for coming over and helping us get that all situated. Welcome to Kara Pranzo's Artist Talk. Thank you for coming. My name is Professor Kara Brown. I'm with the Art Department. And Kara today is going to talk a little bit about her capstone exhibit, Storytelling. So Kara is originally from Minot, North Dakota. And she will graduate this May with a digital design major and marketing minor. Art has been a constant for Kara throughout her life, even as she moved with her family from North Dakota to South Dakota to England and back. During her time at VCSU, Kara has cultivated a comic style of illustration that she brings to her design work. She has interned with the Jamestown Regional Entrepreneurial Center in Jamestown, North Dakota, and actively participates in the VCSU Drama Club, and also loves playing piano and crocheting.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. So, this is about my show, Storytelling. And again, I'm Kara Pranzo. So, to start out, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the story and characters I've developed for the show. So, my story is set in the 90s, the mid-90s, specifically 1996. The 90s is an era that I'm kind of passionate about. There's a lot of cool media from there, and it was a big source of inspiration. So my main character here, his name is Tyler. He ends up losing his sister in a car accident. Her name is Rain. He ends up moving across the country to live with his grandparents. So this helps him get a breath of fresh air, a change of pace, and just move to a better environment. After the accident, he finds out that he can see ghosts. And when he goes to this new school, he has to start over. He's not the friendliest and kind of keeps to himself as he's grieving. But he meets another student, Rachel, at his new school. And she finds out that he can see ghosts, and she's naturally fascinated. She ends up wanting to be his friend and wants him to join her club. So a little bit more about each character. Tyler is very gruff and doesn't have really a lot of friends. He's cynical and he likes to keep people at a distance. He has a little sister who he's very close with, and he loves playing guitar and listening to music for fun. Rachel is kind of a foil for Tyler. She's very warm and friendly, a more curious and inquisitive character, more open. She's very bubbly and outgoing, and while she's not quite a girly girl, she does enjoy some girly things. She's comfortable in her femininity. She loves animals, and she likes quirky, fun, and funky things. And then Rain, my last character that I developed, she enjoys video games. She's a little shy, but overall, she's very friendly, and she's very close to her brother. She's kind of in a tween phase where she still has some toys, but she's starting to find other interests as well and grow out of these things. And she likes some cutesy things like Rachel, but is a little more tomboyish. So my goal with this show was to communicate with visual storytelling. So going into my bio a little bit about me. Again, I'm originally from Minot, and here's me with my family. They were so kind to come all the way out here from Minot as well. So some more about me. Again, I'm a digital design major with a marketing minor, and I've been on VCSU the last 4 years, and I've been involved with many different things, like choir, opera ensemble, and fantasy club. Here is me with my cat Lola. She's one of my buddies. We like to spend a lot of time together. I love cats. And there's me with my sister. I enjoy hanging out with my family, my sister, and of course Lola whenever I'm home in Minot. Here's some more photos of me on campus and with some friends. I lived in McCoy Hall all 4 years I was on campus. And over the years, I've made a lot of friends here. This is the spring 2025 choir tour. And I was able to get closer with a lot of people then. It was a lot of fun. And I'm really proud to say that I've made a lot of friends here over the years. While a lot's changed, something that's been constant before coming to VCSU till now is my passion for art. And my friends and family have helped cultivate that. But now, let's get into some of my artwork from high school and the beginning of my time here at VCSU for a basis of comparison for the stuff I made for my show. So, a lot of these early works are heavily anime and manga inspired at the time, and my influences have kind of shifted a little bit more Western over the years. But to start, here is my character Tyler. So he looks very different from how I had him portrayed in the slide that I showed at the beginning. This I made freshman year on my iPad, and I used free software. I had just gotten this iPad and I wanted to explore digital drawing because I hadn't really done a whole lot of that up until that point. So I was working with this free software to try and experiment with different tools, like using different layers, and then different layer types as well, because you've got multiply layers, which they darken all the paint that you have on that layer, and lightning layers, which essentially do the opposite. They lighten your paint, and clipping masks, which make it so that you can only paint in certain places. And it was also an opportunity to try out different brushes and opacities. I used a lot of airbrushes. My earlier work is a lot softer than some of my more recent stuff. My next work, I also made while I was experimenting with Ibis Paint on my iPad. This is my character, Rachel. And something I find interesting is that she looks pretty much the same. It's kind of funny in comparison with some of my other characters. But I was also experimenting here with her character and her design. And it's definitely different from the final design in some ways. But again, I was experimenting with using different layers, the different layer types, like the multiply, lightning, and clipping masks. And then again, trying out different brushes, and in this case, opacities. And what that means is transparency. Think like opaque and transparent. When I'm lowering the opacity, I'm making it more transparent. And finally, my last work from this time period. This one actually predates the other works, but this is my character, Rain. I actually started this piece in high school, and I was working on the line art, which is the final lines that you see for the character. I ended up finishing the piece in college my sophomore year after I had figured out some coloring tricks from the other pieces. This again was made on Ibis paint, and it really showed some growth, but it's very different from my current works and how the character turned out. These works all helped influence my art as it grew. Going further into influences, there's a few different comic and manga series that really inspired the direction of my artwork over this time here. First, we have my teen romantic comedy Snafu. The title can actually be longer than that. It's kind of long as is. It's a silly title, but it's a great story. It's a great story about personal growth and learning to open up. So, the series is about a cynical teen who is bullied. His name is Hachiman Hikigaya. He's kind of mean, and he doesn't really trust others. He has this teacher that forces him to join the public service club to help him grow and make friends. And he initially butts heads with these girls that he's in this club with. But over time, he learns to be more trusting with them, value them more, and value connection in general, work on his self-esteem issues, and not self-sabotage himself to fix problems, and deal with issues more healthily. Some of the issues this character dealt with I really related to, such as the loneliness and self-esteem issues. So I really related to him in that. And it's been a struggle for me over the years to make connections and open up. So this character helped me really feel seen, and I really related to all of the things he was dealing with. And I wanted to really incorporate these into my work. Also, I really enjoyed seeing the protagonist make the decision to change for the better. It inspired me to as well. And I really liked how he was gruff at first. And then over time, he opened up more as he was healing. It was a really cool progression. So here's an example of some of the artwork from the manga for this. There's a lot of subtlety in the storytelling here. This character in the middle, her name is Yukinoshita. She and Hachiman in particular really butt heads a lot. They've got some very opposite philosophies. So I found this page very interesting because they're literally not seeing eye to eye here. Her eyes are obscured. If you look at what the panel's talking about, he's refusing to change because he thinks it won't make a difference. Whereas her philosophy is I'm gonna change and that'll help the world change. That'll help the world become a better place. So they're literally and metaphorically not seeing eye to eye. But he's also not meeting her gaze because he's not being completely honest with himself either. Another detail I really appreciated was the robot in the top panel, off to the side. There's an upside down A on its face, representing him feeling different and outcast. It's separated from the others. I also noticed a lack of detail in the bottom panels, and that conveys, I think, emotional distancing, which is something he does a lot. This character keeps others at arm's length. This is more of a simple art style compared to some of my other influences, but I think it conveys a lot with just the imagery. I really appreciated that subtlety, and I wanted to try it out myself. So I've noticed this is a more Eastern work. This is manga. It touches more deeply on some mental health themes and connection than I've noticed with some of the Western works that have been my influences. It kind of dives right in, whereas some of the works I've seen over here don't necessarily touch as deeply. My next work is again an Eastern work, it's manga. The title is also very silly. Bear with me. It's called Toilet Bound Hanakoku. So this series has been an influence in my life for a while. I first watched and read it in 2020. The title, I know it's an improper translation. It should be Earthbound Spirit Hanakoku. That's a more accurate translation. He's a ghost, this boy over here. So, as you can see, the artwork is very pretty. I was instantly drawn to this because of the artwork. It's gorgeous. It's very detailed. and the artist does a great job of using warm colors and sketchy line art to portray the mood. It somehow looks very clean despite these techniques. This did somewhat impact my own art with the colors I chose and certain subtle details I would try and place, and it inspired different ideas about my characters. I wanted to explore more morally gray characters and explore dealing with personal growth and trauma. So a bit about the story for this one. It's about a girl and she meets this ghost. He's a mysterious ghost with a dark past, and she ends up making a wish. And things go sideways, as they often do when characters make wishes. But she ends up becoming his assistant, and she helps him solve supernatural problems at their school. The story contains a lot of complex, morally gray characters that are very likable. And I love this. I really wanted to incorporate this into my own works. I also really related to certain characters, having a hard time opening up and experiencing some similar issues in that regard. And it was again comforting to see that I'm not alone, and it served as some good inspiration for some of my characters. I was really enchanted by the story, and it gave me so many ideas and inspiration for creating my own artwork. Also, it's really fun to talk about with others, and I'm very invested in the plot. I'm kind of on a massive cliffhanger right now. They're on hiatus. So here's some artwork. Now, this is a 2-page color spread, and this is in the manga itself. Typically it's in black and white, but the level of quality here is maintained with just the black and white artwork as well. So as you can see, it's very heavily detailed and stylized, which I love that. I love stylized artwork. It's an interesting composition as well. If you look over here on the left, you can see who the most prominent figure in this scene is, who's the one with the power. And that is Shijimame. She's a ghost, and she has powers involved with creating art. Anything she paints or draws becomes real, essentially. So they're trapped in a world of her creation. And that's portrayed, her being on the left here. She's the most prominent figure. And these characters are smaller, and they're down in this corner here, representing the lack of power they have in the situation. I also appreciated the emphasis of art throughout the piece. If you look, there's paints off to the side and different paintings in the background, really conveying the importance of art in the story and this artwork. For my final influence, and my most recent one, I've got Scott Pilgrim by Brian O'Malley. This piece, or this series, I think, has had the largest impact on the way my artwork looks aesthetically. So there's much thicker lines, a more geometric approach to the shapes and the character designs. There's cell shading, which differs a bit from the previous works, which cell shading, for those that don't know, instead of blending things out, it's solid shapes of color for the shading. It doesn't look as soft, and you see it a lot in comics, especially Western comics. There's also warmer, more vibrant colors, and the panels are fairly detailed, maybe not as detailed as the previous work, but these details can add to the narrative a bit. There's also the inclusion of morally gray characters in this work. There's kind of a common theme with a lot of these things. So for a while, I copied this art style. I was really inspired by it, and I really liked the characters, despite them not being the greatest people. But a bit about the story. It's about Scott Pilgrim, who's objectively not a great person, if you know anything about the work. He's 23, and at the beginning of the series, he's dating a 17-year-old high school girl. So, instead of being a responsible adult and breaking up with her, he goes and finds another girl that he wants to date. And this girl's name is Ramona Flowers. And she's not the greatest character either. In order to date her, he has to defeat her 7 evil exes, which are 7 people that she just left. She didn't say anything to them, didn't communicate anything to them at all. She just left. Over the course of the series, Scott, Ramona, and all of their friends have to confront themselves and acknowledge these flaws and make an effort to get better and grow past them. I really love that idea of them confronting those things and making an effort to be better people. While it's a very comedic story overall, it does take these things very seriously, like how the main character Scott has hurt his friends in the past and other people. I wanted to incorporate some lightheartedness with depth as well, like how they do in this series. I also really appreciated that nobody was objectively in the right or wrong, and it helped further inspire the idea of more morally gray characters. two separate pages from this series. On the left side, we've got the more comedic approach, very lighthearted. As you'll notice, there's more bright colors. Whereas on the right side here, where Scott is confronting his past wrongdoings and apologizing for how he hurt his friend, Kim Pine, there's more dark tones. He's confronting what he did to her, which in his case, they were dating. And they broke things off, and she ended up with another guy. And in his mind, what he told himself was he was saving her from this guy, but he was harassing this guy. And he never really acknowledged it. Throughout the series, she's definitely mean to him, but you don't get this context until the end, where he finally faces things. Whereas on the left side, again, it's more lighthearted. It's a little less detailed, I think, but it still conveys some character details. And it conveys the interactions between these characters. So enough about the influences. Let's talk about some past work. So here, I've got my photos. And these photos are all from my silhouette photography from Photography 2 last year. These works really helped me to develop my skills in composition and effectively conveying tone and character details for my illustrations. I got to experiment with a lot of interesting and dynamic compositions here. As you can see, this is a very dramatic composition with harsh contrast and shadows. I wanted to focus on conveying that darker, more somber tone with just the visuals here and make the audience question, what is the thought process behind this? Why is this character in shadow here? What are they experiencing? What are they seeing out there? What's influencing the mood? And it was neat to experiment with the framing as well. My next work, I convey a more ominous tone via visuals. And I think in this work, there's a harsher contrast with the black and white. There's a lot less gray. While there's still some gray in it, it makes for a more dramatic piece overall. And this helps in figuring out ways to capture dynamic compositions. Also, it was a chance for me to set a more dramatic scene that made the viewer curious as well. Because what on earth is happening here? For my final photo, there's this landscape. I typically don't draw a whole lot of backgrounds in my artwork. So this was an opportunity to experiment with landscapes. Even in my photos, I really didn't do a whole lot with landscapes. So it was a great way to experiment with capturing a wider environment, which is not something I typically do. Then moving on to my illustrations. First up, we have a set of tarot cards that I made. And just real quick, I'll show you what an individual card looks like. On the left is the front, and on the right is what the back looks like. So, as you can see, there is a lot of influence from Scott Pilgrim here. This is from a time where I was basically copying that style. There's definitely a stark difference from some of my artworks before that influence. And you can really see the brighter colors and the simpler style overall. So this project was from my sophomore year, from Digital Illustration 1. And for this, I was designing tarot cards. So I had to find a process, because I needed to use some Adobe programs. And I decided to use Adobe, Photoshop, and Illustrator. And what I did is I did the line work in Photoshop and decided to do the coloring in Illustrator. Now this process I was developing was still really rough at this time period, but throughout all of my works following this, I used this process and streamlined it a bit more. Essentially though, for the coloring, I made solid shapes, which was way easier than trying to take the time to either fill it all in or fight with a paint bucket tool, which essentially, my artists in the room are laughing. Essentially, it always leaves a gap, so you always have to go back and clean up, but it essentially fills an entire area. But you'll notice as well that there's no shading in this work, and there's no backgrounds, which is something that kind of changes a bit as my artwork goes on. Again, reading Scott Pilgrim really affected this art style, and helped me take a more simple and cartoonish approach to my works, which helped to make my drawing process a little faster. but this would continue to develop as I made it more my own. My next example is a postcard project from Digital Illustration 2. So, this is from a series of postcards I designed in that class. I expanded on that same process I used before from the tarot cards, where I would draw in Photoshop and I would color in Illustrator. So, I would start out with a sketch on paper, I would scan it, and then I would upload it to Photoshop so I could draw over it. And here in this work, I experimented with a lighter brown for the line art, which I typically did black before. Again, I did solid vector shapes, which are shapes that don't use any pixels. That's what you use in Illustrator. But I used those shapes to color this piece. And in this one, you'll notice that there is shading in the background. So for the shading, I did solid shapes, so it's that cell shading, but I just turned down the opacity so that you could see through it more. The background, I took a photo and I brought it over into Illustrator and I converted it into vector shapes. So I didn't actually draw this background, but we'll get there. Then my final relevant example of past work is this character design I did from Digital Illustration 2. And this, I think, had the biggest influence overall on my project. I was really inspired by the idea. I got to redesign this character. I've had these characters in my head for years. So I wanted to redesign all of them for my senior show. And again, I used that same process, where I drew the line art in Photoshop and colored in Illustrator. So here you can still see a lot of O'Malley's influence in my artwork. But I kind of made it more my own. There's definitely different proportions. It's a little less simplified, and it's a little bit more detailed. I kept the brighter colors though in the cell shading, and while there is still some anime influence, there's definitely less than before. So, moving into my current work, we have this piece first. And this piece is called Tyler's Room. So, again, you can see the incorporation of a brighter color palette and the semi-detailed imagery from Scott Pilgrim. I tried to incorporate as many character details as I could into the background for this one to really get a sense of the character and portray what he's like. For instance, the room being messy. That's an interesting character detail I wanted to include. And of course, all the music and pop culture references. He really enjoys these, sometimes a little too much. Sometimes it can be a form of escapism. But he's into some grunge music and fashion, and it's clear from his expression here, he's bored and he has an attitude. Because again, he's not the friendliest of characters. He can be jaded and cynical, but here in his room by himself, he's kind of lonely. He tries to ignore these feelings and feels it's safer and easier than letting people in. And he puts up a metaphorical wall with his cold, annoyed expressions and snarky comments. This is guitar practice. Here, it uses that brighter color palette still, but it's predominantly neutral colors. I wanted to convey more of this character's passionate side and interests, because he does have these. He's just not very open about them. He tends to get a little too into playing guitar. So, at the beginning, you know how I told him he lives with his grandparents? His grandfather thinks it's too loud, so he told him to go practice in the garage. Music is a big refuge for this character, and it's really reflected on his expression here. It contrasts very sharply from the expression I chose in the last work. Here, he's very excited and determined. And I think I really effectively convey that excitement from music he has here. And this space where it's a little detached, and he has his own space to explore his interests, he feels that this is a safe space. Also, with the tidy tools and workspace in the background, it kind of shows how him and his grandfather clash a little bit. Tyler's a more messy character, his grandfather's not. I thought that'd be an interesting detail to include. So as a comparison, here's how I drew this character before. Again, we've got no background, and we have a more blended look. Definitely a lot more anime inspiration here. My line work is a lot thinner. There's much darker colors being used. And I think there's more details in certain regards, but I don't think they're as as effective at conveying certain things. Also, it's a headshot, not the whole body. So there's some very clear differences right off the bat at a first glance from this past work to my current work. This piece is called In the Hallway. So again, a common theme throughout all of these is there's still a decently bright background. The colors are a lot brighter overall. So for character details I wanted to include here, I have her locker, Rachel's locker, open wide. So you can see she's got a cute little mirror, some Polaroids, a magazine clipping, and some magnets. And I think these help to convey her style a bit. Her pose and expression here also denote curiosity, as she's a more curious and open character. Her outfit here is still pretty stylish while casual, again reflecting some of her personality. And her accessories also help show a love of fashion and accessorizing. Her locker here, as I mentioned, she's a lot more open. Her locker is wide open as well. And her expression here is more searching and curious, showing that she's more open. This next piece is Rachel's bedroom. This is a very bright and relaxed space, which shares her ideal kind of environment. It shows some of her favorite colors, which are those lighter pastels, and more of the style she enjoys. She's a very laid-back character who's comfortable having many different kinds of interests, as you can see on her wall back there. She has some fun lamps, pillows, and bedding as well. I wanted to include a gummy bear lamp, and I thought the lava lamp would be a fun inclusion as well. Her room is also very tidy and organized, which juxtaposes her against Tyler in that aspect. But while they're different in style and cleanliness, they both enjoy music and pop culture. I wanted to give them something in common. There needed to be some kind of common ground between the characters. She also has a sleeping cat in her room. Anybody who knows anything about cats knows that you have to work for their trust a bit. So this helps show that she's a gentle and kind person who loves animals. As a comparison, here's how I drew her before. I still find it interesting how similar she looks, but there are very obvious differences between. Like again, the thinner line weight, the more muted colors. It's not blended, or it is blended, sorry. And there's no cell shading. Again, we have no background, and there's heavy anime influence. Also, while the designs are similar, they're executed differently with the proportions, the clothing styles, and the overall rendering, which is adding those layers, shading, highlights. My next set of works here, we've got Boring Afternoon. And this is Ray. Do you remember that character at the beginning with the pink hair? This is her. Here we've got those brighter colors again. And we've got a game controller here on the couch to show her love for video games. She doesn't really have anyone to play with, however, which is the cause of her boredom. Her outfit here is a bit more tomboyish, indicative of some of her fashion, but you'll notice her shoes are also a light pastel pink. She's still experimenting with her fashion and what she likes. I've got some details that are similar to Tyler's bedroom here with the half-open chips and the half-drunk soda. Here in this case, you can assume that they've been eaten or consumed more recently. With Tyler, God only knows how long it was in his room. But I wanted to convey that they're very similar. Her expression here is also pretty similar to her brother's expression in my first drawing of him. I made sure to use similar features, like the eye shape and the nose shape, for drawing both of them. This next work of her is Lounging and Gaming. Again, I'm showing off that she really likes gaming. That's supposed to be a Game Boy. And in the background, we've got a couple of her interests here. We've got a Care Bear. She still likes toys. That's something she's into. But we've also got a movie poster. And if you look over in the gallery, there's a couple other movie posters I have, and another work of her. So she really loves gaming, movies, and still some of her toys. Here, she's very passionate about gaming. So she has a very similar determined look as to her brother when he plays guitar, showing a similar side of her there as well. In the bottom right corner here, I have a photo of her and her brother as well. So I really wanted to convey the closeness of the two characters. Her outfit here as well is a little tomboyish as well, but she's accessorized with some butterfly clips. I wanted to show different hairstyles and outfits for each drawing I did of her, to get a sense for her trying to figure out what kind of fashion sense she liked. Her bedroom here isn't quite as tidy as Rachel's as well, but she's definitely a lot more tidy than her brother. She also has a cat calendar in the back. So there's a common love of cats and animals between her and Rachel. So as you'll notice, I've compared her to Rachel and Tyler several different times. She serves as a kind of middle ground between these two characters. She also doesn't have a whole lot of friends like her brother though. So she plays a lot of video games when they're not hanging out together. And for a final comparison here, this is what she looked like before. So there's a much heavier anime influence. And again, we've got blended rendering and no cell shading. Her fashion here, I think, is very different as well. It's a lot more basic. I wasn't really sure what to draw for her here. I knew I could draw hoodies, so that's what I went for. She still has some pink hair in her current design, but here it's much longer and styled different. I think her expression here is a lot more plain, and there's a lot less details incorporated. Honestly, overall, she was almost unrecognizable here to the current design I have for her, which I found really interesting and kind of fun to look back at. So, I'm going to talk about some of the processes I had while making the final works that ended up in the gallery. First, I've got my drawing process. So what I would do, I would always start out with a basic sketch on the first layer. A lot of times it would end up being in red. It's kind of hard to see with the lighting in here, but red makes it a lot more visible. And it also helps when you're doing the final line art on the top. So, there are individual layers here for the pose, hair, clothes, and line art. I would start with the basic pose first, which is what you see on the far left. And once I had that mapped out where I liked it and made any necessary tweaks, I would turn down the opacity or the transparency on that layer, and I would make a new one. Then I moved on to making the hair. I would lower the transparency again, and then I made a sketch layer for the clothes. And then I would lower all of the layers, and I would draw over the top with black for the line art. Essentially, all these sketch layers made a guide for me to see where everything was supposed to go. To include the sketchy look that I really liked from both Scott Pilgrim and Toilet Bound Monaco Coon, I used a textured brush in Photoshop as well. So it had that more sketchy, pencil-like feel to it. My next process, coloring, was again in Adobe Illustrator. So what I would do, there's multiple layers in Illustrator as well. I would bring over the line work into an empty Illustrator document, and I would lock it. And what that means is I can't move it around, and I can't erase any of the lines or anything. It's locked in place. I would make layers underneath, and I would have separate layers for each thing I was coloring. I would start out with gray, as that helps show me the contrast between the colors and helps me know if they're going to look good together. From there, I would add a layer for the skin, hair, clothes, accessories, and shading, which you can see the progression throughout here. Here's just a brief video of my general process. It's a little bit different as it's in a different program, but it's overall the same. So again, we're just starting out with a rough sketch. And for this, I'm starting out with the face and body. I'm just kind of playing around with the details, and for this I'm using the mirroring tool. So what that means is it splits the canvas in half, and what you draw on one side, it does on the other as well. Once I finish the general sketch for that, I again turn down the opacity and I do the line art, which I make those lines as clean as possible over the top to make sure it looks nice. Once I have things where I like them, I turn down the opacity again and I start working on the hair. Although in this case, I just started working on the sketch for the hair. And this is again just mapping out where I wanted everything to go. And hair is very tricky to draw, so you'll notice I'm doing and undoing things a lot of times, so I get it just right. But once the overall sketch for that is finished, I went ahead and turned off the previous layers, turned down the opacity on the sketch layer, and I went over to make the line art. With the line art for the hair done, I turned on both layers and I made sure to erase on the face layer where it was showing through on the hair. once I had the line art cleaned up and how I liked it, I would go and start coloring. And I would just use those solid shapes. So I filled out things on each different layer, and I had solid shapes and a separate layer for each of those. So here I'm going through with the shading on a separate layer as well. And shading is also a bit of a bear, so there's quite a bit of doing and undoing. But once I figure out where I want the shadows to go, the piece is essentially finished. The next process I'll talk about is heat transfer. So if any of you have been in the gallery, you'll notice that there's some t-shirts, totes, and some mugs that are hanging up in there. So what I did for this is I did heat transfers. I would start by printing a flipped image of my artwork. And from there, I would go on to use a heat press. And I would take whatever material it was that I was transferring this image onto. And I would first put down the heat press for a couple seconds so that it was flat. It's essentially like ironing. It gets it really warm and flattens it out, smooths it out so you can cleanly lay down the paper on the surface. So the next step after that, you place down the paper where you want the image to transfer, and then you clamp down the heat press for a couple minutes, and then when that's done, the image is transferred onto your new surface. In this case, it'd be the fabric from my totes or my t-shirts. My other prints that I had were done with silkscreen printing. This process is a little bit more complicated. So you start out by covering a screen, which is this thing in the image right here. You would cover the front of that with photo emulsion. And once that's dry, what you would do is you would print out whatever image that you're trying to recreate on some vinyl or paper. Vinyl works best, but what you're going to do is lay the vinyl on top of the screen, and then you're going to expose it to UV light. When I did mine, I exposed it for 45 seconds. So once this is done, you take the screen and you rinse off where the image was, and that clears out some space, and it just leaves the image behind. So there's gaps that you can force some ink through. What you do next is you find a good location for this. You don't want ink going everywhere. But you clamp your board down, you lay out, in this case I did t-shirts, you lay that out, and you line things up. You cover the screen with ink, and you force it through with a squeegee. And then voila, you've got your finished print. So here's a couple of prints that I did. On the left, I've got the heat transfers, and on the right is the silkscreen printing. I really enjoyed making these, honestly. It was a lot of fun to see my artwork be on tote bags and t-shirts and mugs. I had seen other people do that for their works, and I always thought it was really cool. I never considered it as an option that I could do, honestly, until I did it for this show. It was really cool, and it's a practical application in design. I get to do this fun thing, but for other projects, like say for a company or business, they get to make their own t-shirts too. So this is practical experience that I have. I also just really love the way that each print turned out. I think they came out pretty great and helped recreate the artwork very well. And it was also neat. I typically only dabble in the digital side of things when I'm making these kind of artworks. So to take it a step further and experiment with these more physical outputs was really neat. To finish up, got a couple future goals, the big one being graduating. I'd really like to make it across the finish line. I'm right there. The next, I want to find employment in some kind of design position, whether that be at like a marketing department in a business somewhere or a design firm. And then one day, if I can, I'd love to travel. There's a couple places I'd like to visit again, like South Dakota, England, and Germany. I'd also really love to go to Japan and maybe Europe. I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of you again for coming and making the time to see my show and be here and support me. I want to give a special thanks to my family, my friends, VCSU staff and faculty. Thank you guys for being here, supporting me, and helping me grow as a person and an artist throughout the years. Do we have any questions at all? tough one. I've definitely enjoyed the digital illustration classes, but photography has also been a lot of fun. If I had to pick one, probably digital illustration too. I got to explore the most with drawing digitally in that class. I think that's where I grew the most. Yes.
Do you have plans to make the comic? Like, I know it's not like a very right now thing, but I'd love to read it.
I would really love to make it one day. I just need to find the time to sit down and flesh out all the details. I've got a lot of stuff fleshed out as it is, but like I need to come up with more. I forgot I've got this playing. If anybody has any other questions. Yes?
Out of like the printing, do you prefer the heat press more or the screen?
That's a tough one as well. I think the heat press is definitely a lot easier. Silk screen printing, I don't know if you've ever done it before, but it can be very tricky. Trying to get the right pressure on the squeegee. I really think it's cool when it's done. But Echo can tell you, he's had to help me a lot of times trying to force the ink through properly. If you don't get it just right, it kind of looks funky. Yes?
What advice would you have to people that are maybe trying to find their own art style or anything on there?
I would say make sure to take breaks. There's a lot of powering through some tough hours, and that can definitely burn you out quickly. So breaks is a big one. But not being afraid to incorporate different details that you like. For me, I've been drawing ever since I can remember. So there's been lots of different artists I've been inspired by. But just trying different things that I've liked that I've seen in other people's work has helped me find different things unique to myself for my style.
Were there any specific exercises you found really helpful for figuring out what you wanted to communicate most about a character in any scene?
I think a big thing is being well versed in my influences for this. Having a reference. For a while I didn't use references. That was before my time coming here. But using those references and figuring out what you like and what you don't for going about that. Any other questions?
Thank you, everyone.